Hey everybody, welcome back to Video So Tarek and our now continuing series where I talk about the most recent Nintendo legal actions against Switch emulation, and we're back because the Suyu team has received a DMCA notice on their GitLab page taking down the project. But when I say this one is confusing and very strange, I 100% mean it. And don't forget, not a lawyer, but my unofficial law office is located in a strip mall right next to a Subway. All jokes aside, we're going to get into what's going on with the Suyu team and try to break everything apart. But what happened is yesterday, the team received a DMCA takedown notice on their GitLab repository. That's Digital Millennium Copyright Act. It's a very complex piece of law that I honestly think is very poorly written in very many spaces and leaves so much open to interpretation that you could honestly justify anything you do, both pro and con, with that law. But you'll see here all the information is that Suyu is being taken down with that DMCA. But it's a really interesting DMCA notice that we have a capture of, and I'm going to talk about just what's missing from it and why it's actually a very perplexing thing in the first place, because these things are usually written much better than what I see here. But obviously Suyu still continues just because their GitHub repository, or in this instance GitLab, has been removed. They've already gone to a self-hosting format, and there's some other weirdness around it as well that I'll get to later in the video. But they had a full plan on how not to get sued by Nintendo, and I want you to understand a DMCA takedown notice is not a lawsuit whatsoever. This is like just doing a copyright strike on YouTube if someone stole your content. It's not going to the courts, it's just using a law mechanism to do something like remove it. The GitLab spokesperson specifically stated that they received a DMCA takedown notice from a representative of the rights holder. Now, they do not specifically say Nintendo, but it would be assumed that they are the rights holder, and a representative would just be a law firm contracted. So is the rights holder Nintendo in this instance? That is what we're going to presume, but without it being verified by any sort of documentation, I have to tell you that I cannot 100% say that it was Nintendo that did this. And the Suyu developers were saying that they were trying to make this a fully legal emulator, removing all of the things that the Yuzu team got in trouble for, and they have in fact done that. So I do think they are on the right side of the legality here, and again, not a lawyer, but I've written a lot of contracts and sent them to our legal department, and they've all come back with a thumbs up. But of course, and just like the writers here on this website say, any attempt to actually continue this right now is going to basically put a magnifying glass on all of the work you do, which is fine, but obviously with the Yuzu settling with Nintendo so quickly, people are going to try to pop up and continue the emulation projects, and Nintendo right now is rife for looking for these things, because Yuzu basically folded incredibly quickly, and that is because obviously they were in the wrong in certain aspects, and I'm sure Nintendo's lawyers in a room told them that they would get a judgment that would basically mean that their grandchildren would be paying Nintendo back their lunch money. That's not really how judgments work, it's just a joke for the video, so do be aware of that. But let's take a look at the DMCA notice in and of itself, because again, I find it curious that they just say a representative of the rights holder and they don't say Nintendo proper. I'm not sure why, everything would be a presumption otherwise. But if we take a look at the DMCA notice that has been published, you're going to see that it has a heading for 1 and for 2. We're going to go over what's in both of those headings and also talk about what seems to be missing here from the DMCA request. Because I work in entertainment, I've taught entertainment a lot of college students, I've been dealing in the legal side of how to license things for film and television for a very long time outside of being a filmmaker. If we take a look at GitLab's DMCA notice requirements, we're going to go down the line one by one, talk about whether or not they've been fulfilled, and show you what's completely missing. Number 1 is you need a description of the copywritten work that you claim is being infringed. So you have to describe what somebody is infringing upon your work. If we go over to this heading here, it's not actually very descriptive, and I'm not sure why. If I was writing something like this, I would definitely provide more information, because you could read this basically any way you possibly want. If we go back to the DMCA requirements on number 2, a description of the material you claim is infringing and that you want removed. So you need to describe what the material is and explain why you want it removed in the first part. If we go back over to the DMCA takedown request, it is just a URL link. Why is it just a link? That is very confusing. It's not very descriptive. It's just, hey, go click this, take that whole thing down. Again, not what I would normally expect to see. If we go back to 3, 4, and 5, you're going to see we need the name and title of the agent, as well as their contact information, and 2 statements under penalty of perjury. That way DMCA cannot be abused and you just can't file file it upon anyone you decide you don't like. If we go back over the DMCA takedown request, this is what's going to be completely missing from the document, what initially pinged my little radar when I was kind of confused by it. Where is it? It's not here in its entirety or whatsoever. Maybe it was retracted based upon what GitLab wanted to publish, but I don't know. I'm just pointing out that it is not there for you to see. And you'll see here that GitLab confirmed it removed Suyu, the fork of Yuzu, and it says that it's just following its own company's DMCA takedown policy. So there's two things that could possibly be happening here. One of Nintendo's lawyers, either in-house or on contract, sent a DMCA takedown request, or another party sent it, because they just say representatives. They do not say the company. And even this article mentioned that the valid DMCA takedown request would provide some more identification of the copywritten work. And it's just talking about that encryption. This is still all about decrypting the software at runtime and whether or not you have the ability to do it if you own both a switch with a decryption key as well as the copy of the software that would have the software key on it. This is all what this case hinges upon, whether or not you have the ability to use the software key that you have dumped with your switch to be able to emulate the games. And that's what we're going to be talking about next, because I feel like Nintendo never wants us to go to court, because I think this is a very big losing argument if you try to use both of these items to run games on emulation. If we take a look at the Cornell Law School, this is a very good resource of legal documentation, and this is Code 1201 of the DMCA, which they reference in their argument. It says that no person shall circumvent a technological measure that effectively controls access to a work protected under this title. But then the DMCA provides a lot of different exemptions, one of which I think is the reason why Nintendo would never want to see the inside of a courtroom just arguing this. You'll see here under the reverse engineering exemption, and I will read this verbatim from the text: a person who has lawfully obtained the right to use a copy of a computer program may circumvent a technological measure that effectively controls access to a particular portion of that program for the sole purpose of identifying and analyzing those elements of the program that are necessary to achieve interoperability of the two pieces of software. So when you play something like Citra, you are doing interoperability between the software and another computer program. This is an exemption that DMCA allows. If you own the system, if you own the game, and you circumvent anything for the interoperability of those pieces of software and hardware, there is an exemption for that. It even says a person may develop and employ technological means to circumvent a technological measure if you want to deal with that enabling of interoperability. This is why Nintendo probably never wants to see the inside of a courtroom, because the lawyers would argue under this statute, and I think they would very well win. Or as a joke, you can do it if you're a nonprofit library, so maybe emulation groups just need to found a nonprofit library, put some books on the shelf, and then they would be able to argue under the exemption under D. That is a joke. I do not recommend that whatsoever. But again, it's just so confusing what's going on here with that DMCA notice. But the Suyu team did develop their own GitHub. Basically, it's a Git repository on their website. You do need to ask for access, but they are just self-hosting now. And if they're smart, they're hosting on a server in a country that really wouldn't care about DMCA whatsoever. But the weird thing is, as of last night, Suyu is back on GitLab, and you will see here that it was created on March 21st, 2024. That was just yesterday. I don't know what's going on here, how they put it back up. It was down, now it's up. Is it a fork? Is it a joke? Honestly, we need to let some more time go by to see exactly what's happening, because this is probably the most interesting episode of this series I'm making so far, because it has a lot of intrigue behind it. It's not just analyzing legal documents, it's trying to understand what is there and what is missing, because this DMCA notice is missing a lot of the requirements that GitLab would require to take a project down. So what's going to happen with Suyu next? What's going to happen with Switch Emulation next? Honestly, at this point in time, it seems like Nintendo is just playing whack-a-mole. They're going to try to get things removed, more people are going to pop up, and Nintendo's either going to play whack-a-mole with all of these things, or they're going to file a Hail Mary lawsuit trying to get that reverse engineering decision decided. And I don't think that's what they're going to do, so I think we're just going to be playing whack-a-mole for a while. Try that next time something happens, I'll do a video, but we're done, and happy Friday. Bye-bye.